the sort of perceived level of everything else down as well. Now, so we're talking about audio quality, and I wanted to just hit upon, like, what do we actually mean by audio quality? And if you talk about audio quality to an audio guy, and I have to admit I'm an audio guy, you're going to get them sort of talking about, fancy equipment, microphones, mixing desks, all this sort of stuff. However, for our purposes, this is not how I want to define audio quality. I'm going to define audio quality as the extent to which the audio improves the player's experience. So the extent to which the audio is improving the experience for the players. So with that sort of reframing in mind, have a listen to this. I've got another clip here. There's two different games in it, a casual game and a console game. But just while you're watching it, think about what the sound effects are doing to give feedback to the user while it's playing. So here, let's Okay, so I want to actually just revisit some of this here. And so I'm going to turn the sound down here and we'll just sort of play it from the beginning. So have a look. I mean, this thing's got some nice graphics in it. There's a bunch of particle effects and so forth. But without the sound, there's sort of a different effect that they have. If we add the sound, now the elements have got some sort of weight to them. It's a bit more like there's some solidity to the whole thing. So okay, I realise that's not such a great revelation. Okay, with sound it's better, sort of thing. So let's have a look at what the sound effects themselves are actually doing. So first of all, I want to talk about sound design's just the business of making sound effects, pretty much. So high quality sound design we think of as being tight synchronization with the visuals. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a second, but just the flip side of this is that if you go, when you're trying to save money or something, you try and find free sounds or, stuff you download. If those sounds, well, they won't have been made with your visuals in mind, so they're not going to be synchronized properly with the visuals. So here's what I'm sort of mean with this. So what I'm going to do here is there's a couple of examples, and in each case I've got a sound effect played along with an animation that's not synchronized with another one where it is synchronized properly with it. So let's take a look at this. Okay, let me just pause that. So here we've got a dog. He's doing a movement. His mouth, sort of, there's a peak to the point of where his mouth is at the largest point, and then he slams his jaws shut at the end of it. Kind of that's the kind of key points in the animation. And if you see the sound is not going along with that. It's almost like sort of like a badly dubbed foreign film or something. So having a look at that. Now, when we do have the sound matched to the visuals, look at what happens. So you can see in that one, then, you know, like when he slams his jaws shut, there's kind of like there's a part of the sound which is doing that. Plus, when he's got his mouth at the biggest point, the sound is at its biggest point. So I'm just gonna play that whole thing for you straight through again. So in the second one, I hope you can sort of see that it feels more like the dog is actually making the sound. So this is part of the visuals are improved by the sound matching properly with it. Okay, let's have a look at another one. Now, so in this one, notice that there's all of these pieces of wood falling down, and at the end of the thing, especially, there's one chunk of wood that falls down, and there's just no sound with that guy at all. So let me see if we're going to repeat that. Well, here we go. Let's have a look. Now, when we get it properly matched up with the visuals, then every little bit of wood and everything that's happening on the screen is making an appropriate sound. Let me just play those. See if I can play both of those for you again. We'll get the end of the demo here. Okay, here we go. Now here's the proper one. So I'm hoping you can see that, like, when you get the sound really nicely matched with the audio, what it's doing is it's making the visuals look as if they're sort of alive. Like the sound it's as if the world is generating those sounds. So okay, now while we're on the sound effects thing, I'm going to talk about a couple of other. They're calling technical, but like, you know, it's not technical like programming, but just like non-creative stuff. So first of all, formats. I'm sure everybody knows about MP3 files. These things are not that great though. There's a few problems with them. They don't seamlessly loop. So if you've got something like a wind sound or something, and you can make the sound when it's a WAV file or whatever to seamlessly loop. So when it gets to the end and plays at the beginning again, you can't hear that it's looped and it sounds like a continuous thing. But MP3 files, when you compress something into an MP3 file and you try to loop it, there's a glitch that happens at the end of it. Now there is a way to fix this. That's on this website here. There's a little programming involved, and there's a little special way you got to prepare the audio. That's how you can deal with that. However, MP3s have some other problems. So worse compression. Like if you compare MP3 to other formats like OGG and so forth, they sound like if you get two files like an OGG and an MP3 at the same file size, the MP3 is going to sound worse. Or to put it another way, if you want an MP3 to be at the same quality as an OGG file, then you're going to have a larger file. And then the worst part of it all is that they're not actually free. So now, I'm not a super expert at this, but from what I was able to find on this website there, that they charge you 2% of your revenue, or a minimum of $2,000 per year if you're just using MP3. So in other words, if you put it in your app, you are supposed to, as far as I understand, and I would suggest going and checking out this site rather than taking my word for it completely, you're supposed to pay them. So overall, MP3s kind of suck. Now, OGG Vorbis, I've already mentioned. These are the ones that we like to use if we can. They're better quality than MP3s, and they're open source. They don't charge you for anything for it. It's pretty much the one that we go to when we can. One other thing is I wanted to mention is AAC files. These are also better quality than MP3s. I don't actually know about various Android devices, but I can say that on iOS, like if you're an iPhone or iPad or whatever, one stream of AAC file is hardware accelerated for you. So in other words, you can decompress and play an AAC file without having any hit whatsoever on the CPU. So it's kind of worth doing that if you're on iOS. And as far as I know, again, I think you should check me on this, but as far as I can tell, there's only fees if you are making actual AAC encoding or decoding software. If you're just using it in an app or a game, as far as I can tell, it's free to use. Okay, so now the other thing I wanted to talk about is sound randomization, and this especially if you are developing stuff, like making your own engine for playing sounds, you might want to think about putting this feature in. So what I'm talking about is if you have repeated sounds, such as footsteps or something, rather than playing the same sound over and over again, what you want to do is randomly select a sound from a pool of similar sounds. So, for example, say you've got an animation of somebody swimming. You might have the animation doing one stroke kind of thing. Each time his arm goes around, it's going to trigger it's going to trigger an audio file. Instead, if you trigger the same audio file, it's not going to sound as good as if you've got a pool of 3, 4, 5 different ones that it randomly selects from. And better still, that you have your selection process so that you're not so you randomly select, but you never repeat the same one twice in a row, kind of thing. So that's, it's a fairly simple thing to program in, and well worth the effect. So here's the reason for wanting to do this. Let me just pause this for a second. So what I'm doing here is giving an example of some sort of footsteps, some chainmail kind of things. First round is like, well, we've got the footsteps, just one single sound repeated over and over again. Let me just pull that back a bit and play it. So I hope you kind of like, after you hear that repeatedly like that, it starts to sound a little weird and artificial kind of thing. Now here's the same thing, but now we've got a pool of sounds and we're randomly choosing different ones. So I hope in the second case you can kind of hear, now it sounds more natural. I mean, the pool of sounds that we're choosing from, they actually sound very similar, as similar as footsteps sound to each other, but there is a difference. There is natural variation in all of these things in the real world. And even if we don't immediately go, oh, one single footstep repeated is unnatural, there's something that just is jarring again. And if you can do that, put in some of that natural variation, then it sounds more realistic. Let me just give a little bit of that to you again. Hopefully you get the idea. No, I'm just going to go from the beginning. Sounds more like somebody walking over terrain, right? Okay. Okay. Okay, I see. So lastly on sound effects here, I want to talk about budget, because obviously when you're making, when you're doing sounds, budget's definitely important. I wanted to first say, so at the beginning there I was dissing getting downloaded sounds because they wouldn't be synchronized with the visuals, right? However, you can use them for things where there is no animation. So if you've got mouse clicks, or say you've got a dialogue box which is going to pop up, and there's when there's no animation, it just appears kind of thing. Those things there's no animation to synchronize to, pretty much. So you can use downloaded sounds for those, and that will save you money. And the other thing is you want to prioritize sounds that are frequently heard. So, especially if they're things that the user is going to do. But also you want to prioritize reward sounds. So if you're doing something in your app or your game or whatever, where the user has completed a level or made an achievement or something like this, a lot of the times these things might be exactly what you're monetizing, right? You're getting you're rewarding the user's going through doing certain things, and when they get to the end of the level or whatever it is, you've probably got a whole lot of graphics, and they're going, yeah, you made it to the end. So make sure those things are also similarly put together with some nice sounds that might actually lead directly to some monetization. And the other thing is, if you emphasize sound effects over music, and I'm going to talk about music in a second here, but sound effects are cheaper to create than music. For one piece of music, you can get a whole pile of sound effects, and they actually have more of an effect on your users, because these are the things that are giving them the feedback of what they're doing in their app and so forth. So finally, just to say that, as I've been talking about, high quality sound effects make the visuals, sort of look better, if you like. They make them come alive. So you can think of sound effects as being a cheap way to sort of improve your graphics quality. Graphics, animations, all those sorts of things, take longer, so they're generally more expensive to create and so forth than sound effects. So you can so that's a from looking from the budget point of view, that's a good way to save money and get things to look better. Okay, so now I'm going to take a look at some music stuff here. I'm actually going to go out on a bit of a limb and delve into a little bit of brain science-y sort of stuff. I'm not a neurologist or anything like that, but I'm getting a lot of my information from this book here on intelligence by Jeff Hawkins, if anybody's into that. Maybe if you're into artificial intelligence or something like that, this might be some inspiration. But I'm going to take a very simplified view of what he's doing. So our brain basically has all this data coming into it all the time, right? Like our eyes are taking it in, our ears are taking it in, and thankfully we have our unconscious processes can sort of model what's going on and say, okay, no worries, we've got this. We don't have to keep worrying about it. We don't have to worry our conscious mind about it. So we don't have to constantly say, oh, there's a beige wall, there's a beige wall, there's a beige wall, there's a beige wall, right? Because our unconscious process have said, yep, it's not changing, it's a beige wall, we got it. However, if something comes along that's new and different, such as a piece of music, then there's a sort of a hierarchy that the unconscious processes ping up to the conscious awareness until, to the point where you go, oh, okay, so now I'm listening to a piece of music. Now I'm going to go on a little side journey here for a minute and talk about what music is doing in order to make that happen, sort of thing. So there's really a balance that's going on. If something is too repetitive, we get bored with it and tune out, and our unconscious processes take care of it. If it's not repetitive enough, if there are not patterns for our brain to grasp onto, then we also lose interest, because there's no, our brains are all about finding patterns. So there's this balance between the repetition and contrast making differences that composers learn to do. So now, obviously, I'm not expecting everybody to read music, but I'm wondering, can anybody read that? Do you know what it is? Yeah, Beethoven's Fifth, right. So this is, you've probably heard it, right? I'm imagining da 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 da, da 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 da, right? Is that familiar to everyone? So what Beethoven is doing here is, if you look at the first, can you see? Oh, you can see the mouse there. Okay, cool. So look at these first three notes. They're three short notes, and it's all the same note, right? So we've got a bunch of repetition there. And then after that, now we're going to a long held note. And so we've changed, we've changed the length of it. So we've got some contrast there, and plus also it's at a different pitch. So we've got even more contrast there. So that's the da-da-da-da thing. Now for the second bit here, he's really taken the whole first part, exactly the same thing, and pretty much repeated it. Three short notes and a long note. However, this time it's not at the same pitch. It's a little bit lower. So the first one is da 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 da, and the second one da 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 da. So within these first few measures, he's got all kinds of levels of repetition. Dome is like sort of 3D and it's blue or whatever, and it's a dome. Now on the side of the building here, he's reduced it to a sort of a 2D, so now it's an arch, and it's sandstone instead. And of course you can see that, like, so he's got slightly larger ones here and slightly smaller ones there, so he's repeating it like crazy up there, and then he's varying it here and repeating it again in the different size. And in fact, here's another view of it. You can see like the three versions of the arches. They're repeating at different sizes. And if we get even up closer, even along, this is sort of along the rim of the roof there, you can see he's using these tiny little arches along there. Even the railing here, I mean, they're sort of made into circles, which are really just the two arches, you know, glued together kind of thing. So much as in the same way as Beethoven is using that 4-note motif, Frank Lloyd Wright is using the arches, and even to the point where he has in the parking lot, there's the arch over the lights there, sort of thing. So with that in mind, I just say have a listen to. I've been singing Beethoven's Fifth badly, so I thought I'd give you a little bit to actually listen to. Have a listen to this and see if you can hear how in the next few bars how he's using that 4-note motif and moving it around in pitch mostly to make up the piece. So I hope that. yeah, there we go. So, you know, as I said, it's a masterpiece for a reason. I know you've heard the piece before. Maybe you might be inspired to go download it and really listen to the whole thing through. It is, you know, it's brilliant. And in fact, with that same thing in mind, you could really listen to any piece of classical music, you know, pull out some Mozart or whatever, and you'll find those motifs and you'll find them doing the same sort of thing. Okay, so I'll quickly go through this. I wanted to actually touch on a few other art forms. So we've done architecture, we've done music. This is actually, I'm just talking about, this is a book called The Non-Designer's Design Book by Robin Williams, which I've used a few times. I'm not an artist, but this is for like dealing with page layout and web layout and stuff like that. And they talk about, she talks about four, we're not going to be able to see the bottom one there, unfortunately. 4 principles she has. Contrast and repetition, exactly what I've been talking about. And then alignment, and the one you can't see is proximity. Alignment and proximity are really kinds of repetition. So here's a poster that sort of demonstrates what she's talking about. So you can see there's this big sun here, so that's kind of a motif. And then the big red circle is repeated in these smaller circles. The smaller circles are varied. There's contrast because they're different sizes, and they're also different colors. Then We've got this font here that's used in the poster, and there's a big version of it here, and it's contrasted with a smaller version. And then plus also that's aligned down the side, so there's some sort of repetition of this line here, and there's a different line over here where it's repeated. So all of these things are being used in this page layout example. Here's another one, choreography. So choreography is really about managing bodies and shapes and stuff in the three-dimensional space of a stage. And here you can see that there's this sort of diagonal line going on, right? So the men are doing it with the leg and the arm, and there's two of them on this side. And then the woman on the opposite side, there's a contrast there, is doing it with her two legs sort of thing. So again, different levels of contrast and repetition going on in this particular snapshot. Finally, game design. I don't know if anybody's played this game. It's called Braid. And I can't really... The image isn't really showing you what I'm talking about, but what he does is he plays with time. So you get to control time backwards and forwards in this game, and use the control of that time to get through various puzzles. And so his control of time is sort of his motif, and then he switches it up by making some elements on the screen will not be paying attention to the time you've got on control and things like that. So by varying these things, he makes ever and ever more complicated puzzles as you work your way through the game. So okay, I know this is quite a sidetrack from HTML5 here I'm doing, but my hypothesis is that all art at its core is a balance between contrast and repetition. Now, I don't know every single art form, but I'm pretty sure that if you go and look at this, and that you'll find that this crops up everywhere, and it's quite a useful thing. Once you cotton onto it, you can use it in all kinds of different circumstances. So anyway, back to the music thing. So we're talking about music in games, and we've just talked about the repetition and contrast, which is how music is catching and keeping our attention. Which is great if you're like trying to write a top 40 hit or a symphony or something, but it sucks if you're playing a game or trying to concentrate on an app or something. So what happens is that the users actually turn the music off. And you pretty much know you can't ship a game without having a button to turn the music off. And the reason for this is that it's like when you're driving, right? So if you're driving along somewhere and you've got the music playing, but then you get to the end, towards the end of your trip, and now you've got to pay attention to like where you're actually going. You've got to find a turn off. You've got to find a street number or something like that. And so the first thing you do is you turn the music off, because the music has been designed to grab your attention, and you can't afford to have your attention distracted from the job at hand. So there's two ways of dealing with this. The first solution is to actually remove the melody. The melody is the part of the music which is mostly doing that contrast and repetition thing, which is grabbing your attention. And so what you're left with is a sort of a groove or an accompaniment or whatever that will set the mood, which is music that's its purpose, is to set mood, but it won't distract as much as having that melody in there. So here's an example of a piece of music I'm going to play. The first time has the theme in it, so you can hear the melody and everything, and then the second time we're going to hear it without the melody. Okay, so here's the same thing without the melody. So the second one's actually kind of more boring, right? It doesn't have a tune there as we're sitting here and paying attention to it. The second one's less interesting to listen to. But it's in fact the very reason that it's less interesting like that allows you to be able to listen to that thing more and put it in the background. Yeah.
One thing I noticed about without the melody, the key changes seemed completely unexpected. So I don't know if that's always going to work, but,
That's interesting. Okay, so the key changes seem unexpected. I guess for that particular piece of music, I've heard it a lot. Probably what's happening is that the key changes are the things that are popping out as something actually happened, right? So I would say, but I can tell you that like if you have something like that repeating and looping in a game, you can get used to it and it won't grab your attention in the same kind of way. But that was interesting. I hadn't thought of that. So, okay, I said there were two solutions. The second one is to use ambience. So ambience is, well, actually, if I just shut up here for a second, just take a listen to the noise in the room. So that buzz there has been here the whole time, right? And you probably noticed it when you first came into the room. But in fact, what's happened is our unconscious processes have taken hold of that and sort of said, okay, we know what's going on, so we don't need to bother the conscious awareness with that. So you've been able to, listen to what I'm saying or whatever, and not bother about it. So ambience does that same kind of thing. Now, I'm not talking about using like monotone buzzes in your games or whatever. But what we can do with the right sort of ambience, I'll play a bit in a second, is you can still set the mood, but it becomes subconscious. And actually, it's even more subconscious than having the the rhythmic sort of stuff that I played before. So here's some examples of some ambient stuff. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so those things they can be tonal, they can be sound effects or whatever, but once they're looping in a game, you can really have them sitting in there and they won't distract the user from what's going on. Now, so I wanted to talk about melody, and since I've been dissing melody this whole time, I want to say I'm not opposed to melody. It's just that it's more powerful when you use it sparingly. So here's for example, if you're going to, if you've got, say, a casual game of some kind, an app or a web game, one sort of setup we often recommend to our clients is we have like a theme in the menu, and that theme need only be like sort of 30 seconds long. So it's when you first step into the game or whatever, and you're looking around. You don't have to do any thinking terribly much. So that becomes like the sort of the thing by which your game will be recognized. Then when you do stuff like win or lose a level, or make an achievement or whatever, that you have some very short stings, 10, 15, even 5 seconds long, which are based on this main theme. So that's all actual, regular, fully composed music. Then for the rest of it, when the user's actually doing the thing that your game is or that your app is, that you use ambience if you can, and you can use ambience in cases where, say, people are working on puzzles or something like that, or you use those musical grooves. And the reason you might want to use a musical groove is if you've got some action to convey. Like the one thing that ambience doesn't really do is it conveys any sort of like energy or something. So if you've got somebody running around shooting people, then an ambience isn't probably going to work, but you can still have you can have one of those musical grooves, or you can even have something that's just percussion only, and that will give a sense of sort of action and energy, and won't cause them to turn the music off. So there's a bonus about doing this stuff. If everybody's familiar with this cost, quality, and time triangle thing, and just quickly, the general idea is that, you know, if you want to improve one, then the other two suffer. So if you want better quality, then it's going to take longer and cost more, sort of thing. But in this case, we actually get to do two of these guys at once. So because the cost comes down because the using ambience and musical grooves and so forth takes less time than doing, and so costs less money than doing fully composed music. So you're saving money. And if you remember that our definition of quality is that we're improving the player's experience, right? So the player is being allowed to focus on the game when they want to play the game. They're not being distracted by the music. So the experience is better, which is, in other words, higher quality. So improved quality, improved cost, all in one hit. I don't know of any examples where you get 2 for 1, so make the most of it. Okay, so finally to return to our original question about audio quality and why you should care. Well, so if you remember, we've talked about sound effects being tightly synchronized to the visuals, make the visuals seem as if the world is more alive. It sort of makes them better. And by using ambience and musical grooves and things like that, you're not distracting the player from playing the game. And all of these sorts of things add up to a better experience for your players. So even if your users, your players are not going to come out and say to you, "Oh yeah, I want better audio," they do care about it at some level. And I hope I've maybe convinced you guys to care about it a little more too. So that's my talk. Thank you very much. I'm just going to pop up. Here's some information how to contact me, and I'll also just quickly mention that after giving these talks, sometimes people get the impression that my company, Dsonic, where we do sound effects and music, is kind of too expensive because we do all these high-end console games and stuff. But we actually like indies and mobile and web games and stuff like this. And so we have this licensing deal to kind of bring down the price. I can explain how that works. You still get customized sounds and stuff. Don't want to be too much of don't want to be too much advertising here, but I'll tell you about that if you're interested in it. Thank you very much.